Hello everybody, this is Tip-Top MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we are going to be looking at a bunch of custom cards. I'm going to give you my opinions on them, how I think they could be improved, whether they're balanced or not, and half of them are legendary, so I'm going to talk about them being commanders. Basically, it's just fun looking at a bunch of new custom cards. If you haven't seen any other videos in this series, there is a full playlist about once every other week. I just take a look at a bunch of custom cards, and it's a lot of fun, so why don't we jump right into this. Starting off, we have Civilized Ways. By the way, whoever made the card, because I didn't make these cards, they were made by people on r/custom magic, and that's in the description. There's a link there, but I have their Reddit username in the upper left, so if you like the cards you see, check that out. There's probably a lot more there. Here we have Civilized Way. It's a 3-cost white enchantment, and it says players can cast spells and activate abilities only during their own turns. If a creature would be sacrificed, exile it instead, and creatures can't fight. So the idea here is, you only do things on your turn. You can't kill things. You don't sacrifice people. You don't, instead of saying, hey, you committed a crime, now you're dead, now you're being exiled or jailed or whatever, and so it's being exiled. And then also creatures can't fight because, that's very uncivilized. Well, this is somewhat of not a joke card, but a card that is kind of meta in a way that it references, the real world and being civilized, sacrificed and exiled. They're not exactly one-to-one with what you do in real life, but it's definitely an interesting card that definitely, I think this is balanced. I think this could be a card that's actually printed, but yeah, I like it. Next, we have Gary Dark Merchant. So this is obviously Gray Merchant of Asphodel. This is him made into a legendary creature. So it's a 6-cost, 2/4 legendary creature zombie wizard. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. Gary Dark Merchant deals 1 damage to each opponent for each black mana symbol in that card's cost. Then you gain life equal to the damage dealt this way. Put that card into your hand. So it's basically Gray Merchant of Asphodel's effect, which is when it ETBs, except it's devotion on all your stuff right to someone's face, except this is repeated, and it's the top of your library. So it's an interesting way to take a card that wouldn't be super great as a commander and make it an awesome commander. And actually, I thought about doing this as because every Sunday is Custom MTG Day on my channel, so I review a custom Magic set, with Marvel. I do a mechanic making game, so I thought about maybe introducing generate a random card, turn it into a commander kind of thing, and I think this would be a really good way to do turn Gray Merchant into a better commander. So yeah, I like it. I also think it's pretty balanced. Next, we have Prismatic Spring. It's a land, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 1 life. If you do, choose a color. So you can tap to add colorless, or you can tap to add 1 mana of the chosen color, of a color chosen, with Prismatic Spring. So essentially, you're going to play this. At that time, it'll only tap for colorless. The next turn, you can pay 1 life. Let's say you do. And now you say blue. Then you can tap for blue that turn. And on the next turn, you can still tap for blue. It doesn't say chosen this turn. So essentially, after you pay life 5 times, this thing can tap for 1 mana of any color for no cost. So in a way, it's better than something like City of Brass, where, every single time you're tapping it, you're being dealt damage. It also has the option to not deal damage to you if you only need the colorless. I actually think this is a really powerful land because, think about this in a 2-color deck. Would you, say, pay 2 life, in a 2-color deck, actually, compare it to, a shock land, right? Yes, you are going to end up paying 2 life for 2 colors, but you have to wait a little bit. So I think that's actually balanced. I don't think this would probably be super CEDH if you were looking at it in a commander sense, or even anything really competitive, just because it takes too long to get the colors you need. But in something like a Joda deck in commander, this would be amazing. You can just, I don't have red, now it's red. Maybe you don't even need to make it end up tapping for all colors, but it just is super versatile, and a land I would say would probably go in most any deck. So yeah, I like the design. It actually might be a little too powerful. You could almost get rid of the colorless mana. Yeah, and that would be a thing that maybe you could do, and it would still be a pretty good card. So yeah, my thoughts could be, a little bit too powerful, but I'd have to see it in game. Next, we have Waru and Din, Picnic Raiders. It's green and a black for a legendary creature elemental rat 2/2 with menace, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you can create a food token. And whenever you sacrifice a food, you may pay 2 life. If you do, create a 1/1 black rat. So this is kind of the perfect food commander. It has a way to generate food. It has a way to gain value off of sacrificing that food. And what's interesting is when you sack a food, you may pay 2 life. Well, you're gaining 3 life from sacking a food. So you essentially just gain a little bit less life, and then you get a rat instead. So you kind of feed some of your food to a rat, and boom, now it's your friend. It'll fight for you. And I really like the design of this card. It's everything you want on a commander. And I mean, okay, a 2/2 for 2 with Menace, eventually that's not going to be able to just swing in and create food, which means that even at the low CMC, you might generate a little bit of value early on, but then you have to have other things in your deck in order to fully support it. So I love the design of this card, and it works well. Next we have Diadem, Ascended Tidetaker, white, black for legendary Planeswalker Diadem. It starts with 2 loyalties, and it loyalty counters, and it says whenever an opponent draws a card, they may put a loyalty counter on it. If they don't, they lose 2 life. So essentially, your opponents are going to be punished for drawing cards, or they can just, just put a loyalty counter, and you're not taking any damage, which, I mean, that is definitely a massive downside. The fact that, something about like Nekusar, who's going to deal damage to you every single time you draw a card, right? Well, that can kill someone. This will never kill someone. Why? Because why would they ever kill themselves? They might as well just put the counter on it. And so what she says is -2, exile target creature with power 3 or less, or -X, return target creature or enchantment with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. So she's going to get rid of the biggest threat and return things. So your opponents are going to have to cast spells to kill your stuff that you're going to bring back, and they have to cast spells for themselves, which you can kill. So, and then what are they going to need to do? They're going to need to draw cards to replace those, which then she's going to put loyalty counters on. So in something like Commander, this seems really powerful, but I actually don't know if it's too broken. Honestly, I think it might be slightly in the wrong color. I feel like adding blue to it might make it a little better with that whole draws a card takes damage. Blue and red generally do that, so it may feel a little bit out of, the right colors, but I think it's interesting design. I like Planeswalkers that'll have all minuses and other ways to put loyalty counters on them. Next we have Nurgle, Father of Plagues. It's 1 green, black for a 2/7 legendary creature, Daemon. When another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Nurgle. And when it leaves the battlefield, all creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on him. So essentially, he's this big just bomb that's gonna more things are dying. Okay, +1/+1 counters, +1/+1 counters, and then just eventually everything is dead. Now, I do see a couple of problems with this card. I'm not saying it's a bad design. I like the way it works, but it says leaves the battlefield, which I get is on purpose. But if you can flicker this, I mean, obviously things have to die, but let's say you have, I don't know, this is very standard thinking, but say you have the cat, the Cauldron Familiar, and Witch's Oven. Okay, here's what you do. You sacrifice the cat, creating a food. Then, 1 creature's died. This thing gets flickered, whatever. Or, first off, every time you're I don't know, just something about it just seems off, and it could be abused, but then again, that's true of many cards. I think the design of it'd be very interesting to build around, as it's not very typical, but I think it does have some interesting potential. I would just be a little bit wary of maybe there's something that could be done with it that is unintended. Next we have Lair of the God Pharaoh. It's a legendary land, and it enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap, put a -1/-1 counter on a creature you control, and add 1 mana of any color. Okay. This is obviously worse than a lot of different things. First off, this is worse than, if we're talking about Commander, Command Tower, any of the lands. There are certain lands that, there are certain lands that are kind of like Command Tower, but they come in tapped. The issue with this is, right, then you better be playing at least a 4-color deck, right? Because if you're playing a 3 or 2-color deck, then there are lands that simply have 2 colors, and then or 2-color lands that just enter tapped, and that's it. And this is legendary, which can be both a good and a bad thing. It means it can be tutored with things like Sisay, but obviously this does have a home. This has a home in anything that cares about -1/-1 counters. Let's say you have a persist or a undying. I don't remember which one it is. I think it's undying. But it enters with a +1/+1 counter, and if it dies with a +1/+1 counter and it doesn't get revived, well, now you have a way to put -1/-1 counters on it. Maybe there's a Hapatra deck that cares about when -1/-1 counters are put on things. So it definitely has a specific home, but it's not a super broad card. But, I mean, it could be. If you just don't have the lands, you can just use this as a kind of card. But you have to have that target for the -1/-1 counter. So, also, yeah. Overall, interesting, but definitely has to be in a deck specifically built for it, or, like, in that general theme. Next, we have Crossel, the Storm Wings. It's 1 blue for a legendary creature, 1/2 elemental bird with flash and flying, and when it enters the battlefield, if it was cast, create a 1/2 blue elemental bird creature token for each spell that has been cast this turn. So it's Stormcrow, but it actually has Storm, so you're gonna have it enter the battlefield, and it basically just says Storm, create a 1/2. This is obviously kind of a joke. Stormcrow and Crow Storm, both cards in Magic that care about 1/2 birds, and this is definitely a commander for that deck. In terms of the practicality of this is actually pretty cool. Obviously, you do have to have 4 mana open after you've cast all these spells, but in a typical Storm deck, I could see this being a more casual way to win. Obviously, there are cards that can just instantly win you the game, not just create a bunch of 1/2s, but it is definitely interesting, and it may not be an awful card if you have something like a Sack Outlet, because now you're like a Sack Outlet that adds mana. Let's say Ashnod's Altar or Phyrexian Altar, one of those. Now, for every spell you cast, you're gaining mana, which is definitely something you want to do in a Storm deck. So I could totally see this happening. I don't really see it too much as a commander. I think this would fit more into a deck. Next, we have Cave of Wonders. It's a legendary land, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep, create a treasure token. So this is kind of just a normal land, except, okay, so it enters the battlefield, and it doesn't do anything. Then the next turn, it can tap for color, or any color, 1 mana of any color, and then 1 mana of any color. So this is essentially, this thing enters the battlefield tapped, but add 1 mana of any color. But that's not it. It also is, now you can up your artifact count. So now if you care about that, artifact count is up. It's also, hey, you can get colors outside of your color identity in Commander. It's also a way to store up things. It also generates sacrifice outlets, or like not sacrifice outlets, but things that can be sacrificed. So this just has so many uses. It would definitely see a lot of play. Now, obviously, it is kind of slow, but at its worst, this enters the battlefield tapped, add 1 mana of any color, and you can save it. Even if you're not taking advantage of it in any other way, this would see play in a lot of decks. But I think it could see play outside of something like Commander, which generally, because these are custom cards, I look at them from the lens of Commander, because if someone were to play with custom cards, that's probably one of the only formats where people would be okay with it. Obviously, you'd have to get an okay from your playgroup. Every playgroup is different, but generally, Commander seems to be more casual, so that's why I think of this mostly in Commander. But yeah, this is, I think, might be a little bit too powerful. Maybe if it said, I get the ideas that you can build up your treasures, but maybe it says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you don't control any treasures, create a treasure token, just because there are so many different ways you could do this. Or at the beginning of your upkeep, pay 1 mana if you do create a treasure token, or I don't know, maybe something weird like that, but I don't know. Next we have Ruin, Undying, Calamity. It's black, green, so very hard to cast. Legendary creature, skeleton giant, 4/3 with flash, and you may cast Ruin from your graveyard by sacrificing a skeleton creature in addition to paying its other costs. So you'll pay 4 and sack a skeleton. So that pretty much means you will never ever pay for the spell's cost. Commander tax. And when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your graveyard, untap all skeleton, vampire, and zombie creatures you control. Creatures you control gain haste and death touch. So this is essentially just a commander that can keep coming back. It's going to give you a sacrifice outlet, and it also can kind of help you get in for the win. It definitely would see a lot of play in a skeleton, vampire, zombie deck, but honestly, I feel like skeletons would be the most likely. First off, you need the skeleton in order to bring it back, and skeletons really, I think, have the least commander potential right now over something like zombies that have a lot of commanders, and vampires that also have a lot of commanders. So yeah, I think this would definitely be an interesting skeleton commander. Next we have the end of the video. So yeah, that was just a look at 10 custom Magic the Gathering cards. Now, Magic the Gathering custom cards are so much fun, and if you want to see more, again, there'll be a link in the description where you can find the subreddit. I've also done a bunch of videos on custom cards, whether it be ones I've made, ones that the community has made. I've done little games with it, and it's just so much fun, and it's something I don't see a lot of people doing. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. Let me know what you guys thought of all of the custom cards. Is there something I missed? Is there an interaction that I didn't see? Is a card that I said was kind of meh really good? Let me know. And also, if you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button. I will see you guys in the next one. Again, more custom MTG next Sunday. See ya.